Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Anne, and I am from Call of the Canine. Actually, gonna switch. I think there's too much light behind me, even though it will disrupt my little poodle. And this is our monthly Underdog volunteer seminar. And I'm super excited about the topic this week. It is how to speak dog. And if everyone could do this, dogs' lives would be so much better. Now, once we get going, I'm going to share my screen. So once I do that, I minimize the cameras. So I can't see you if you wave at me. Either you can go off mute and just chime in, or use the hand raise feature under the reactions. But just bear in mind that once we get started, I can't see you, but we want this to be as interactive as possible. So just get my attention any way that works. So with that, we're going to go ahead and begin. Usually people kind of trickle in once we get started. So our topic tonight is how to speak dog. And as of now, I'm minimizing the cameras, so get my attention either by going off mute or by using the hand raise. And if you're not at a point where you're participating, please do stay on mute, because the background noise might sound quiet to you. But, oh man, there's way more people in the waiting room. I didn't know I set this up with a waiting room. Bear with me. Oh boy. Okay. Hold on. Okay, I guess I set this up with a waiting room.
Right.
Anyway, if we want it to be as interactive as possible, so please do speak up, but if you are not speaking, please double check that you're on mute, because background noise that sounds quiet to you, sometimes the speaker amplifies it, so it actually can be a big distraction to the other participants. So just go on and off mute when you're going to be contributing. For those that are just joining us, I'm minimizing the cameras now. You'll still be able to see me, but I can't see you. So either go off mute or do the hand raise feature if you have something to say. Uh-oh. And we started. Okay. So my first question to all of you is, how do humans communicate primarily? What is our main way of communicating? Also, there is somebody who is not on mute. Okay.
I'm muted.
All right. Humans communicate primarily through what?
Language.
Language. Yep. Through words. Even when we're communicating on our device, we do a lot of electronic communication. It's still verbal. We're still reading and writing words. We do communicate through body language also. Probably every one of us would have a very easy time telling us what this guy was going to communicate. So we do use body language, but it's not our main thing. We're extraordinarily verbal creatures. How do dogs communicate primarily?
Physically.
Yep, body language. Dogs have some verbal communication. We all can probably tell the difference between I have to pee whine and oh my god, I hurt myself. Their vocalizations are significant, but they're very minimal. Do you know how many verbal words, human English words, a dog would learn if they were one of those really highly trained, like the ones that are on commercials that are really, really dialed in? About how many human words would a dog like that learn in its life? 50 would be at the high end for the amount of English words a dog could learn. We have said, probably over 1,000 since we started this 3 minutes ago. The difference is extraordinary. Dogs communicate almost exclusively with their bodies. But there's more. Do dogs know when we're communicating verbally with each other? No. Dogs have no idea we don't speak dog. They are not capable of thinking outside of themselves enough to understand that we don't understand them. They think we're just kind of a vocal breed. They're like, yeah, they're kind of barky, but you get used to it. They're great in other ways. Just like dogs can see better in the dark than they can in the light, they have no idea that's the opposite for us. That's why you trip over your dogs in the middle of the night. They don't know you can't see them. A dog cannot conceive of that our sensory and neurological experiences are different than theirs. As such, we move our bodies a lot with very little significance when we're talking. Dogs are reading into every single movement we make, and they assume we know what they're saying with their body movements. So it really is on us to learn to speak dog, because if we want them to learn to speak human, we are going to be disappointed. So why do dogs communicate? What do they communicate about? One thing would be resources. All social animals communicate. If you're a herd or a tribe or a pack, you evolve to be able to work with the other members of your pack, and you have to be able to communicate to do that, and it's survival related. So food, territory, mates, pretty much everything's a resource to a dog. One of the things I love about them is that they love everything. And there's a lot of communication around resources. Another one is food acquisition. They hunt in packs. They can communicate and coordinate an effort to bring down prey. You definitely got to let the herd know when there's danger. They can communicate to each other if there's a threat. Dogs are kind of unique in that they're social animals. They communicate affection, friendship, nurturing, some of the same things we humans do. Emotions. They can invite each other to play, and they can communicate disinterest in connecting. Just like if you're at a bar and someone is very interested in talking to you, but you're not so much interested in talking to them, and we can communicate that disinterest. Dogs are not always interested in interacting with each other or with other species either, and they have ways of communicating that disinterest. But that's a lot of what their communication centers around. When we're learning to talk like them, there's kind of 3 things to keep in mind. The first one is look at the whole dog and look at the context. Once people go to these seminars, they get really obsessed and they're like, but that ear is forward and that one's slightly to the left, or his tails are down, but his ears are forward. Don't get too literal and don't look at just one thing. You've got to they're complex creatures. You've got to look at the big picture. The other one, and this is the biggest thing that I'm hoping you take away from this tonight, is that almost all of their body language comes from their underlying muscles, and there's 3 main things to keep in mind. Anything that's forward or high would indicate offensive or excited. They're going for something. If it's neutral, that means they're relaxed, they're chill, they're in a good space. Anything that is back or low is indicating fear, avoidance, appeasement, anything like that. So forward, neutral, and back are going to be the 3 themes that we talk over and over and over about tonight. And the final one is there's an energy and a movement about dogs that's a big key. So sometimes looking at still pictures doesn't give you as clear of a picture as if you're looking at it all in the context. One of the things that we need to remember the most is in the wild in general, but especially with dogs, smaller equals less threatening, bigger equals more threatening. That's why like a pufferfish explodes when they're sending away a threat. Or dogs will rise up, Basanjis will even kind of flip to make themselves look bigger. So when we're communicating with dogs, the lower we go, the more we're saying we're not a threat. The bigger we get, the more they assume we're saying that we're threatening or confronting them. Because remember, going back to they don't know, we don't speak dog. One of the most common calls trainers get is, the dog was just fine. He was snuggling with me on the couch and I stood up and the dog bit me. Well, you made yourself bigger. The dog was fine when you were low down, being non-threatening, but they interpreted your movement as a threat and they responded in kind. So, tails. Most people know that dogs communicate a lot with their tails. What can you guys tell me about tail communication? With tail talk, the first thing you need to know is what the dog's natural tail carriage is. It can be kind of swooping, it can be upright, it can be lower, but when we're talking about if it's forward of natural and neutral or lower than natural, you got to know what your starting point is. So looking at the dog's tail carriage and knowing what their natural tail carriage is important. If the dogs, do you see how this dog's tail, this is a lab. Are their tails upright typically? No, they have a swooping kind of slide-like tail. This tail is up. That is higher than neutral. And we've talked about forward, neutral, back. That is offensive. That's a warning. The dog may be excited about something. It may not be aggression, although in this case I would say that it is, looking at the rest of the dog. But if they're excited, if they're interested, if their desire is to put less space between themselves and whatever that stimulus is, you're going to see an upward tail. It can also be a warning, stay away from my resource. But it is an offensive or excited position. If their tail is lower than their natural, that is the opposite. That indicates fear or appeasement. If we look at this dog right here that looks like maybe a bloodhound mix, and then the black labish guy, the lab's tail is way up, the lab's body is forward, it is pushing into the space of this bloodhoundy guy. Look at where his tail is. Way down, his whole body is down, his ears are back. That dog, the offensive one, is really pushing in, and the other dog is really trying to appease. Now, this probably won't result in an escalation because this dog is really, really appeasing. And if the black dog continues to push into that space, the yellow dog will probably roll over. Now, if the dog does not stop its affront when the dog is rolled over, it's done everything it possibly can to appease and it didn't work. At that point, they definitely will start to fight. This guy has nothing left he can do. But what we're seeing there is being defensive, fearful, or very, very appeasing. This is another example with the beagle. Their tails are kind of upright typically, and his is way down. And there's a nice relaxed neutral tail. This is what we like to see. Now, tails, we know that up is offensive, down is appeasing, neutral is good news. But the wagging is a significant communicator. Dog trainers would be the richest people on earth if we got money every time they said, his tail was wagging and then he bit me. Yeah, well, a wag, people kind of got a memo at some point that a wag means the dog is friendly or inviting interaction. That is not necessarily true. Dogs communicate a whole lot with their tail. That's why they dock the tails of some breeds like Dobies, that they want to be more reactionary and fighting. They're trying to cut off their ability to communicate, so there will be more reactivity and problems. So when we're interpreting a dog's wag, what does it mean? We look at the speed combined with the tail carriage. It's kind of a two-part thing. If the tail is north of higher than its natural carriage and it's going fast, get away from that dog. That dog they do it a lot when they resource guard. It's staying away from my resource, get away from me, I'm being territorial, whatever. That is offensive aggression. And so if there is a tail up waving fast, that is bad news. The other one is if the tail is waving low and fast. We've probably seen that a lot, where the tail is down and it's going back and forth, kind of banging against each leg really fast. That dog is saying, I am scared. If you give me an out, I will take it. Unfortunately, most humans don't speak dog. They say, oh, his tail is wagging. They pet the dog who is begging for its life. It sees you moving in on it and it bites. It happens all the time. A low, fast wag means give that dog some space. It is frantically offering you appeasement. And no, petting them is not going to reassure them that you're friendly and you mean no harm. And they think that you're attacking and they will bite you. Happens all the time. This is just a nifty chart that kind of walks through the high, average, and down tails combined with the speed and what the dog is saying. If we see a nice, slow, rhythmic wave, or even sometimes it's faster if they're excited, but it's not the frantic flipping back and forth. Typically, you'll see kind of natural, relaxed muscles. That's a happy dog. That's a good sight. Only thing that's better is the helicopter wag. That is a happy dog. Now, tails are one way the dogs communicate, and it's a major way, but there is much more. We're kind of just scratching the surface. And as we're diving into learning this new language, it's helpful to think about conceptually, it's all driven by their muscles below their skin. Again, when the muscles move forward, offensive. Move back, appeasement or fear. The first one that people think of a lot is the dog's hackles going up. We can see that in this case. The technical term for that is piloerection. That is handy to know if you're at cocktail parties, because when you start throwing that around, brings the house down. But you can call it the hackles too. What it is it's the same principle as goosebumps. You know, if you get goosebumps on your arms, the hair stands on end. The dog is getting goosebumps along its spine, and it's causing their hair to stand on end. That can happen in the case of offensive aggression. Sometimes they're just excited, just like you. You can get goosebumps for kind of a response to a lot of things. This particular dog is pretty far forward. His ears are forward, his tail is up, so that is definitely a threatening posture, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Piloerection can be just that they're excited. So it is something to watch for. It's a good indicator of the state the dog is in, but it can mean a lot of things. The muscle tone and tension and position. The more wiggly the dog is, the better the news is. Wiggly, curvy bodies are very good news. Stiffness, that means the muscle tension is getting more. That is not good. If there's a total stillness, that dog is about to strike. Do a startle, make a loud noise, squirt a water bottle, but whether it's you or another dog, there's always that still moment right before they strike. But the more wiggly and curvy the dog's body is, the more relaxed and happy that dog is. Again, with the muscle tone and tension, when the muscles are moving forward, that's offensive or a warning. Neutral is relaxed. What is this dog's muscles doing? What are we seeing from this dog? What's he saying to the person taking the picture? He's offering a lot of appeasement, isn't he? You can see he's kind of shrinking back and shrinking down, going low. His ears are back of its natural carriage. His tail is low. This dog isn't necessarily afraid, but he is definitely offering appeasement. This is not a confident dog. The ears are the next to the tail, probably the next biggest thing that dogs communicate with. Also another thing that gets cropped frequently. Again, because then you're cutting off the dog's ability to communicate effectively, and that will make the dog more aggressive. And Chihuahua's ears actually will move even like a little antenna towards a sound, which I think is adorable. But when we're assessing what a dog is saying with their ears, we have to first know what's neutral, what's their natural carriage. If the ears are forward of their natural carriage, that is either offensive aggression or the dog is excited. But again, they're going for something, whatever it is. If the ears are back, we're seeing appeasement or fear. In this overweight little Chihuahua here, we can see again with our theme, back is scared or appeasing, and he's pulling everything back. You can also kind of see it combined with his eyes, but those muscles are all moving backwards. And if the ears are neutral, the dog is relaxed. That's what we always want to see. It means the dog is happy and that they're probably not going to bite anyone, which is good news for sure. After the ears, the eyes. Again, if the muscles are moving forward, you're going to see the eyes in slits like this guy's here. You can see all of his facial muscles are moving forward, as opposed to this little friend here, where his muscles are going back, creating big, round, fearful eyes. So slits mean the muscles are going forward and the dog is probably guarding something, but it's definitely offensive or excitement versus going back where it's fear or appeasement. And if they go way back, you actually can see the whites of the dog's eyes. If you can see the whites of a dog's eyes, its muscles are very tense. That is not natural, and that dog is not in a good state. Mouths are the next thing after the eyes. I look at kind of the corners of the mouth, like if you can see on this puggly type fellow, you really can only see his front teeth, if you can imagine if he was pulling his jaw back. But we can even see on his nose there, his eyes are slits, his ears, everything is telling us those facial muscles are moving forward. In this case, I think he's resource guarding the lap of the person that he's on. And this picture bugs me because they pretty obviously set the dog up so they could get the picture, which I think was mean to that little Jack Russell. Look how sweet he is. But it is a good picture that shows us how to look at the corners of the dog's mouth to indicate what their facial muscles are doing, and the facial muscles are how they're communicating. A nice slack jaw, tongue hanging out, that means the dog is relaxed. That is a nice sight to see. This dog here looks pretty chill. We can even see with the corners of his mouth, they're kind of flopping down because his facial muscles are just totally relaxed. That's a dog I would pet. If the jaws, so we went from forward to neutral, this is what their facial muscles look like when they're back. If you look at the corners of these dogs' mouths, how they're pulling them back. That is, well, in this case where you can see every tooth in the mouth, that's out and out terror for sure. You can see the ears are back, his body is down and back. That dog is pulling back with everything he's got. This one is less dramatic, but we are seeing some anxiety there. Look, I can see a molar. We can see kind of wrinkles along the corners of the mouth, and she's definitely pulling them back versus forward. That would show us some anxiety, some discomfort. Not a terrible amount in the case of the Dobie. That's Gilly, by the way. She's an underdog, but it's certainly there. So now that we've kind of broken down each body part into the forward, neutral, and back to tell us what the dog is trying to say, we can get more into their social interactions. Dogs are pack animals, they're social creatures. So their interactions amongst each other can mean a lot of things. The first thing is the greetings. And this is if something's going to go wrong with a dog or a human interaction, it's probably going to be that initial greeting. When I go to private clients' houses, if the dog is human aggressive, I know that if I get through those first 5 minutes without getting bit, I'm probably not going to. What we're looking for in these greetings is curved bodies, not head-on, face-on greetings. But if you look at this Aussie poo there, where she's kind of curving around the other poo of some kind, or the shepherd in the pit there, their bodies are curving. That is good news. That is a polite dog greeting. That is a relaxed dog that can be that curvy. That's the kind of greeting we would like to see. With a greeting, if you see some relaxed interest, if it's a real high arousal greeting, even if they're not aggressing, even if they're just excited to see each other, that arousal is not going to bode well. A nice, relaxed, happy interest is a good greeting, much like humans. And loosey-goosey bodies. Again, that means their muscles are not tense. A dog whose muscles are relaxed and neutral is in a good place. So that loosey-goosiness we like to see. We don't like to see the tension or stiffness or the dreaded still moment that only lasts for a second. Now, after we've gotten through the greeting, the dog may invite you to interact further, or they may not. But most of us know what this is. Play bow. They go down and bring their front body forward, their butt and their tail up in the air. Sometimes they even wiggle their butt or wag their tail. That is an invitation to play. They also sometimes do it when they're stressed or anxious, just like we can have words that mean a lot of things. But in this dog, where we're seeing that they're pretty relaxed otherwise, he doesn't look too frantic, that's hey, want to come play with me? I want to play. Do you like to play? How do you know if a dog is inviting you or another dog to chase them? There's a surefire way to tell every time. Does anyone know what it is? They will pick up an object. Whether it's a human and they pick up your hat or your sock, or another dog, they will pick up a toy. Sometimes they'll even throw it if they're feeling really playful, or kind of throw their mouth to make sure everyone can see the treasure they've got and how much fun they're having with it. They take off running and they kind of wiggle their butt as they take off too. So there's like the toy pickup and the head toss and the butt wiggle. That means, hey, look what I got, come and get it. That means the dog wants to play chase. Don't do it if you're a human, though. There's nothing worse than a dog that loves to be chased. But that is important to know that that's how the dogs invite chase. Does anyone know why? Because the majority of the time when you see dogs chasing, the chasee is not loving it. I see it all the time at the dog park and in classes where a dog is running for its life and one dog, or sometimes even a pack of dogs, is chasing it, and the humans look on with such delight at all the fun they're having. No, that dog is running for its life. The overwhelming majority of the time when we're seeing chasing, it is not a healthy consensual interaction. The only time it is when the dog has something in its mouth. But I would say, as a general rule, if you don't want to break down the analysis, just don't allow chase. It really isn't. I mean, they love it sometimes when they have a toy, but overall, it's not the best thing for them. And the majority of the time, the chasing is not good. and it really can end badly for the dogs and the people. What else do dogs communicate about? So how about like alpha dogs and dominance and submission? Is that kind of a myth, or is that real? It is real. All social animals have hierarchies. There's a reason for this in evolution. Hierarchies keep the peace. To function as a social unit, there has to be a hierarchy. This is true if it's a human family or a human business or a herd of elephants or cows. If it's a social group of animals, there absolutely is a hierarchy. People have kind of stayed away from, trainers at least, from alpha dog and dominance because people confuse that with being really rough and reactive. If you think about it in your life, you probably have had leaders that were rough and reactive. Were they very good leaders? Did you enjoy working for them? No. It's not very good leadership, and in the dog world, it's the same thing. Typically, leaders are relaxed, confident protectors. But dogs do communicate their hierarchy a lot, especially at the beginning. So when you get a new foster dog or a new forever dog in your home, there is going to be a lot of status inquiries and a lot of sorting things out. The overwhelming majority of the time, there is no reactivity or aggression. Dogs are very skilled at sorting this out without aggression or reactivity, because if you're thinking in terms of evolution, the aggression and the reactivity is not helpful to your survival. So we do see it, especially in pet dogs, but it's not really what an alpha dog does. So how do they communicate their social hierarchy? The number one way a leader communicates that they are the leader for dogs is aloofness. They do not give the subordinates the time of day. This poodle in the picture is 8 pounds. She is my resident dog and an Underdog alum and the most confident leader you have ever seen. But if we watch how she interacts with this little puppy that desperately wants to play with her. Oh, please work. Okay. We can also see Archie's play bowing. She is owning her space. She will not let him get closer, and she absolutely will not engage. So Archie is offering a huge play bow, a happy tail wag. Oh, he wants her attention so bad. Does she care? Even a little? No. Being aloof is the number one way leaders communicate, and the number one way dogs establish their hierarchy is I am just so too good for you. Another way is owning space. Space is one of the biggest resources in the animal kingdom. That isn't terribly true for humans, but it is a little bit more now with COVID. Think about if you're at Costco and you're on your dot waiting in line and someone else steps into your 6-foot bubble. They have invaded that space. That was yours. You were standing there first, and now a threat has come in. Well, that's how dogs have always looked at space. We're just catching up now that we're in a pandemic. But owning and taking that space next to aloofness is the next biggest thing they do to communicate who is controlling the resources, who is in charge here. So if we watch this one, oh, come on. So did you see how he really wanted to go into her space bubble, but his back legs were kind of anchored? He knows where the limit is that she's set, even though she's doing very little. And again, she's being pretty aloof. He wants to play, and she's like, oh yeah, well, I don't want to get behind on doing nothing. I better just lay here and ignore you. Sorry. Yeah. Look at that tail wag. Yeah, it isn't that she, oh, there was a helicopter wag. Yeah, he wants to play so bad, and she is enforcing a space bubble. So we can see there, that was absolutely a status inquiry and an answer. There was no aggression, but there was definitely a dominant dog in that situation. That Dobie had held all the cards. The baby wanted to play so bad, and yeah, no, total control of the situation. Controlling resources. Now, in this picture, what would you guess is the resource being controlled, and which dog is controlling it? There is a scrubby sponge, a bone, some other stuff, an Adobe, and a poodle. What, in terms of a status communication and a hierarchy, what's happening in this picture? Any guesses? All right, the resource that is being controlled is this window. Oh, what's that?
I think the door, the window, but I was going to say the dog by the door.
Yeah, that's a good guess. It's actually the window. It's the natural light, and the window seat is the primo seat. And the leader, the alpha dog, is always resting in the primo position. The window also lets you look out for the pack. You can see what's going on. That crappy secondary spot in front of the door where you can't see anything is where the lower ranker goes. Neither one of these dogs cares about the bone or the sponge. I just put those in to stage the picture to throw you off. They're not in this particular interaction with these two dogs. The bone and the illegal item are not valuable resources. They both could care less. What they both want is the sunlight and the space by the window, but only the leader gets it. She actually doesn't even usually let the Dobie get that close, but now that she's clearly established she can have whatever she wants, she's been a little more generous with the space. But the resource is the window and the light and the visibility. And part of that is because then you can look out for the pack. But part of it is just if you're the leader, you get the best stuff. This is another one that gets confused a lot. Soliciting attention and affection is a status inquiry. They do it to each other. You saw that with Archie, the little black doodle that was kind of soliciting that attention from both Zeta and Gilly, and they wouldn't give it to him because they were establishing their leadership. When dogs are soliciting attention and affection from us, people tend to interpret it as, oh, they love us. No, I mean, they do. Don't get me wrong. Dogs love, the way dogs can love so bravely is one of the reasons I love that species so much. It is beyond amazing. But when they are soliciting affection, that is not how they're expressing that love. That is a status inquiry. And that gets us into a lot of trouble a lot of times because you get a nervous dog that starts soliciting that affection and people think, oh, she's so snuggly. Well, that's a nervous dog wondering who's in charge. Whoever's in charge is the protector. When you start giving in to that affection, sometimes they even start to kind of press their head. Like this particular dog will, if you stop petting her, she'll butt her head up against your hand. And if you don't pet her firmly enough, she'll push it in. That is a status inquiry. And it doesn't mean you can never pet your dog. I'm not saying that, but don't confuse what's happening in that situation. That dog is looking for security and leadership, and if you give in to all of that attention, the dog thinks they are in charge and that they're responsible for the safety. And a nervous dog is not going to do a good job with that kind of responsibility. Just like nervous, insecure leaders you may have dealt with in your life, nothing really ever goes very well under their leadership because they're not confident. It's the same thing. So we see it all the time with the nervous dogs soliciting affection. People give it to them because they're speaking two different languages, and it causes trouble.
So is the only time you're supposed to give affection when you initiate it then?
Not necessarily. What I tell people is it's sort of like giving a kid candy. Are you going to say no every single time they ask for a treat? No, I mean, sometimes you'll say yes. But are you going to give them candy every single time they ask? No, that would be all day and all night. So what I kind of do is if I'm not busy, yeah, I won't, necessarily make out with them as much as they want in that moment. I'll only do that if I'm initiating it. And normally I wouldn't stop eating my breakfast to pet a dog. We only did it in this case because I was like, ooh, this will be perfect for the seminar. Pet her, pet her, pet her. But typically, if you're busy doing something else, if you're making a meal or typing an email and the dog wants you to stop what you're doing to give them attention, don't do it. Finish what you're doing and then come over. But yeah, if you're not doing anything else and they walk by and want a little snuggle, yeah, sure, why not? So does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. But if it's a behavior problem dog, especially with aggression, then I would be really stingy with the affection. But if you're not having problems with the dog, again, think of it like a kid asking for candy. Not every time, but sometimes. Okay. When things go wrong with dog social interactions. Initial greetings are the number one time. What's happening in this greeting here? What do we see? We see a very stiff Doberman Pinscher and a very appeasing German Shepherd. And on top of it, if you look, that Dobie is on a leash. That's going to further impair their ability to communicate. And they're facing head on. A good greeting would have nice curved bodies like the ones we saw before where they were sniffing butts and kind of moving in a circle. This is a head-on confrontation. There are stiff muscles. There is appeasing. This is a bad interaction. Now, this picture I actually took from a website where they were using it to advertise their training. So I'm guessing that it did not end in a fight because pretty clearly no one figured out that this was not a healthy interaction. But for us, in terms of foster dogs and new dogs, typically, if you can get them off to a good start, it will go a lot better. If you start out with a bad initial greeting, it may go bad right then and there, and you'll end up with an altercation. Or it may not go that far, but you're never going to have that good, healthy rapport that you're hoping for. So that is one of the main times communication will break down with dogs, and we'll see it go to aggression and altercations. Resource conflicts. Unfortunately, the video I had for this just kept getting corrupted and I couldn't get it up on there. But when we're thinking about resources, what do you usually think of are resources that dogs value?
Food, their owner.
Food, owner.
The toy.
Toy. Yep.
Another dog sometimes.
Another dog for sure. We saw in that picture the window seat. That's a big one, usually. Sunlight, a bed, a couch. Dogs like just about everything. That's one of the things I like about them most, and it's why they're most trainable. But they do see a lot of things as resources that we wouldn't think. I was at a house this week where the dog was resource guarding and had bit every family member. What do you think he was guarding? Ticks, any bug that got in the house. The dog valued so much that when the people would go to kill the bug, the dog would attack them. So the resource conflicts, there's obvious ones like food and bones that we know to watch for, but you have to kind of think like your dog. What is their resource? And like we saw in the case with Zeta and Gilly, Zeta is the poodle and Gilly. Zeta controls the resources and Gilly respects it, so we have harmony. if there was control conflict, if the other dog was not respecting that, then you'll get into a bad social dynamic sometimes. And it's usually the humans are like, I don't know what they're fighting about. It just came out of nowhere. Probably not if you asked the dog. Chasing is another time things go wrong. I've said it before and I will say it again, but unless the dog has a toy in their mouth, assume they do not want to be chased. But it's a hard one because physically it can be very hard to stop because they have 4 legs and we have 2, so it's hard to interrupt. But I really do not encourage people to let their dogs play chase. Another time things go wrong frequently is moments of fear or high arousal. People at the door, that any new entry to the pack or to the situation is a high arousal moment because dogs are constantly assessing safe and dangerous. If everything stays the same and they thought it was safe, they'll think it still is safe. You get a new entry and the safe dangerous situation has changed and they're going to reassess. Creates arousal, and in those moments of arousal, they're just much more likely to trigger. They're much more in fight or flight. It's again, when somebody new comes in or we're about to get fed or anything that's exciting to the dog and working them up, that is, you're much more likely to have problems than when it's low arousal. So, what about us humans? Can we learn to speak dog to our dogs? Kind of. We can do better than most people do, that's for sure. The first thing is, just like listening is the most important communication skill between humans and our interpersonal communication. I say that as I've talked for like 45 minutes straight. But you listen by observing. Watch your dogs, watch how they interact with each other. It's incredible, it's fascinating, and you learn so much. You can own space. People tend to control the dogs by grabbing their collars a lot, which drives me crazy. There is nothing that is more uncomfortable to the dog in that they understand less, and it leads to all kinds of bites because dogs do not like their collars grabbed. You're much better off controlling resources and owning space the same way the dogs do it amongst each other. And you saw, like in the case of Zeta, oh, that's weird. They control resources just to control them. But here we have, I'm keeping Gilly off the couch just for the purposes of showing you guys how to do it, but owning that space is so she's going for the couch. I don't grab her and push her away. I stand like a goalie in front of it and guard it. That's my couch, not yours. And then I just keep stepping into her space and pushing her back. The next frame, she goes over and lays on her own bed on the floor. So you definitely, and especially if you're having a dog with behavior problems, being aloof and owning their space and owning the resources they want, well, in a lot of cases, that's literally all it takes to turn the situation around. They just need to know that there's someone else in charge. Again, not to be a bully and flex your muscle and feel so good about your power, but because a leader is a protector. Once they feel safe, once they feel like someone's responsible for them, the dog can relax a lot and their behavior will get better. And one of the ways you can do that is owning the space and the other resources. So that is one way to speak dog. You can tell a dog you're not a threat. This little fella, he's appeasing, he's nervous, he's scared. We see his body's shrinking back, the ears are back, the tail is down. We can communicate with a fearful dog by keeping our body low. If you remember that first slide where low is non-threatening, high is threatening, don't face them head on. When dogs communicate a face-to-face head-on confrontation, is a threat. They stay side to side or back to back, and eye contact is threatening to dogs. So if you're talking to a fearful dog, you can talk to them by keeping your body low, keeping your back or side turned to them, and not making eye contact. So if we watch here, let's see, sorry. You can see that if I was standing upright, if I was leaning over, if I was trying to reassure her by petting her, she would freak the F word out. Probably try to bite me knowing this dog. I can show her that I'm not a threat much better using body language and talking to her on her own terms. So yeah, I mean, to an extent, yes, we can speak dog. Not as well as they can. You saw how hard it was for me to own that resource of the couch and push Gilly away. Zeta never has a foster or a visiting dog within 5 feet of her. They can do it much more subtly, just with their eyes and their facial expressions, but we can do it too. So if you're interested in this and want to learn more about speaking dog, the best thing, oh, someone's just joining us now, we're on the last slide. The best thing that you can do is just start watching and observing your dogs and start asking, what are they saying to each other? What are they saying to me? Okay, who has questions or thoughts or input or things to teach us?
I have a question.
Yes.
So this is my resident dog.
Oh, hang on, I'll put the screen up. I'm not looking. Okay, yeah.
Resident dog, 3-year-old Maltese, happy boy, playful, but the joke is amongst some of the kids is he's an attention hound. So he's the one who, keeps moving the head in, pet me, another dog's getting petted. He'll kind of hip check them out of the way to get petted more. Is that him being more dominant and alpha then?
It's definitely a status inquiry. Okay. I would say it's a status inquiry both to you and to the other dog. It isn't just among the pack. If that was me, I would continue to pet the other dog and use my body space to push him out of the way.
Okay.
They can sort out their own hierarchy any way they would like. I don't care. But there needs to be a clear line that he's not the leader of the pack, including you. At that point, you will have a lot more problems amongst the dogs because there isn't a clear leader and no one is feeling safe.
Thank you. I'm trying to learn what to teach the kids too that want to, that are petting them.
How old are the kids?
They vary in ages from 4 to 14.
So if none of the dogs are aggressive, I would just let the 4-year-old do as they will, because developmentally that child isn't probably capable. And because dogs are social animals, they're also understanding that that 4-year-old is at a lower level of development. There is no possibility they're going to see that child as the leader. It just isn't going to happen. The 14-year-old, I would definitely say, no, if you were petting this first dog, or if you don't feel like petting a dog right now, then you just ignore him, push him out of the way. Perfect. Sort of like if you were giving one kid candy and another kid tried to take it. No.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Well, in that case, that is all we have got for tonight. This is all recorded, so it will be up on YouTube, which is at callofthecanine.com. And of course, I always appreciate the social media love on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. Or you can email me, and then we'll be doing this same seminar again. The seminars are always 7 p.m. on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. So, and it's twice a month, but it's the same one 2 times for those that can't make it the first time. So you certainly can come again. It's a service that Underdog provides and pays for, but it'll be the same content. And then in August, we'll have something new. Okay. Thanks for being here, everybody. We're signing
Thanks,
off.
Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. That was great.
Thank you.